Today was the Hall of Fame voting day. Okay,
I heard about
so
this.
David Ortiz, legendary designated hitter for the Boston Red Sox, three-time world champion, was, really the pillar of the city of Boston when the marathon bombings happened. He had that famous quote, "This is our effing city." The rest is history. We all know David Ortiz's accolades, but it was also the last year on the ballot for Roger Clemens, Barry Bonds, Kurt Schilling, yada, yada, yada. I can go down the whole list. But the main ones I'm going to focus on are Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens. All these guys played in the steroid era, okay? So for argument's sake, let's call the steroid era from like 1995 to like 2000, I don't know, like 2008, whenever the Mitchell report came out. David Ortiz tested positive for steroids. He was the only one that got voted into the Baseball Hall of Fame today. But you have the home run king and Barry Bonds. It's not in there. Arguably one of the greatest pitchers in baseball history, and Roger Clemens. They don't get the Hall of Fame vote because they tested positive. Well, actually, they didn't even test positive. They were listed in the Mitchell report. There's always been rumors about steroid use, and Barry Bonds, he came out as being part of the Balco scandal with drug testing and whatnot. But the fact that you have reporters and writers voting on David Ortiz being a first ballot Hall of Famer when he tested positive, but those two guys in their last year of eligibility were not voted in the Hall of Fame is just comical to me. It's a farce. It's a waste of everybody's time. All these writers, these sanctimonious idiots. Like I can't do it anymore, man. Like I want nothing to do with baseball, and that's a sad state of affairs. Like they're in the middle of a lockout right now, and I honestly don't think they're going to get at like half a season in just because of the acrimony between ownership and the players union. And if they don't play a game this year, no sweat off my back, dude. I want nothing to do with it. I can't. I'm not the biggest Barry Bonds fan, Jay, but he definitely deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Roger Clemens deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Just have a separate wing and just call it the steroid era. But you can't write the story of baseball without Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds.
Yeah, Puma, I mean, listen, I'm not a baseball fan, but I think I kind of see your point. The question I have is, and please, excuse my baseball ignorance because I don't follow the sport like you do. So why is that David Ortiz is allowed to get in, even though he's been connected to steroid use, but the other folks aren't? Is this simply like a popularity contest?
Yeah.
Is it something where these writers hold grudges? Like what's the thought process?
Exactly. That's it. I mean, you want to get this to like NFL, parallels. This is what happened to Terrell Owens. Like we can all agree T.O. was a first ballot Hall of Famer for football, but because he was a bit of an a-hole to a couple of writers, specifically out in Philadelphia, in San Francisco, he was put in the doghouse, and he had to wait 3 years. David Ortiz, was he like a bit ornery with reporters from time to time? Yeah. But again, if you look at the optics, the Boston Strong stuff, and the 86 years of, they broke the curse of the Bambino. He had the big old smile. Everything was Big Papi, and everybody was happy and whatnot. Yeah, that's why he's in. Because, Roger Clemens was monument. Like you can make a monument of how much of an a-hole that dude was to the press, both in Boston and in New York. Houston, he started to come around. He wasn't that big of a d-bag, but Barry Bonds started his entire career, even going back to like the Pittsburgh Pirate days, especially his last year as a Pirate when they lost to the Atlanta Braves in the National League Championship Series. There was some very hard feelings between Barry Bonds and the press, especially with the Balco scandal stuff and whatnot. So yeah, it's all because you have people like Dan O'Shaughnessy, and I know you have there's no love lost between you and O'Shaughnessy.
He's a loser.
But you got people like O'Shaughnessy and whatnot getting in their feelings about things. And there was this one reporter, Jay, I'm forgetting his name. He was on MLB Network today, and he did the opposite. He didn't vote for David Ortiz because there was an air quote gray area with his test results, which, long story short, Ortiz did test positive for steroids, but Bud Selig at the time, God rest, and Major League Baseball upper management, they were trying to essentially cover it up by saying like, oh, we're not too sure about these test results. When everyone knows it's BS, he was listed in the Mitchell report. They were trying to cover it up to save, the big face of baseball. But that same guy who left David Ortiz off voted for Sammy Sosa, Barry Bonds, and Roger Clemens. So it's like what gray area? Like you have 3 documented steroid users, and then a 4th one that you didn't vote for. It's just a joke, dude. And I went to Cooperstown, and I loved it going up there. But again, man, I have no desire to watch baseball, and I think this might be the death rattle. Like they're in a lockout, and there's going to be a lot of hard feelings between what the union wants and what ownership wants. And I think it might be like the 94 strike again. And, if people want to go back in history, the 94 strike basically led to the steroid era because you had the home run chase between McGwire and Sosa that saved baseball. Like you go to any reporter out there and say, hey, what was the big, saving grace of baseball coming out of the strike? And they will all tell you it was the home run chase between McGwire and Sosa. And anyone else that tells you it wasn't that is a liar.
Well, Puma, I've always thought about this, and maybe this is the first time I'm like kind of articulating it to you. But like, how? And I don't want to put you on the spot here. Maybe you haven't given this thought, but like, how do you even fix this issue, right? Because like, it seems like a lot of this comes down to personal feelings of how a writer feels about a player determines if that player gets in or not. And I feel like that is so wrong. Like that shouldn't matter what a writer feels in the grand scheme of things with a player getting into a Hall of Fame, whether it's NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball seems to be the absolute worst at it. So why haven't some of these leagues, and maybe this is something the MLB can kind of look at going forward, why haven't they made like a committee, like, obviously a certain group of people they vote in on a yearly basis that have a certain set of criteria where they sit down and say, all right, well, this is the criteria mandated by the MLB, organization that every year we must follow this and come up with X amount of players that we can stick on a ballot. And then that's being sent around to either, the committee itself. They could do it in a way where the committee itself votes on half of it. The other half could be made up by like current players and managers. I mean, people that actually know the game, right? So why, I mean, is this maybe a watershed moment where maybe the MLB can step in and obviously, be one of the revolutionary leagues that comes up with a solution for these issues? Or
I mean,
do
it
they
could
even
be.
care about that? Like, I mean, do they even care about that? Because the one thing I feel about MLB is like I feel like they don't care about fans.
No, they don't.
The MLB like network and the game and all that stuff. They care about like what's true and what's the written rules of baseball. Like baseball to its core, the way it was invented back in 1920s. The rest of it, if you can't get on board with, then go screw yourself.
Yep, exactly. And Jay, they could be that sports league that says, all right, you know what, we're gonna, because the Baseball Hall of Fame, they the next step for these players like Bonds and Clemens, that this was their last year of eligibility and they're not going to be on the ballot anymore. I think they have to wait another 5 to 10 years, and then there's like subcommittees in the hall. And like you'll have like the early era Baseball Hall of Fame voters, which I think are just like the old timer writers, but they have to look at a certain criteria of years. So like you're going way back to like back when the Jackie Robinson didn't break the color barrier. So you have like regular baseball, and then you had the Negro leagues. So they'll look at those pool players and see who do they think should be eligible to be go into the Hall of Fame. Then there's like another subcommittee that's like the golden era. Now you're talking about like the 50s to like maybe mid 70s, like 1975. And then you have the Veterans Committee, which is like the best of the rest. They're going to have to wait their turn to get to the Veterans Committee. And honestly, Jay, that might be like 20 years from now before they even get to the Veterans Committee. When, in my opinion, you scrap the National Baseball Writers Association of America. That's the pool of reporters and writers that vote for these guys every year. You get rid of that. You just make it the Veterans Committee, and you go from there. Like out of that list, maybe you do like half the writers can vote on, and here's this pool of people that the Veterans Committee can do. Honestly, I think it should just be Veterans Committee for all sports leagues. Like people in the hall should vote on people that should be going into the Hall of Fame. But I don't know if there's like money involved for being an NB, double A kind of deal, like the National Baseball Writers Association. I don't know if there's like money that's involved for these writers that do it. They probably don't want to take food out of people's mouths. But Jay, like you said, baseball doesn't care, dude. Like they're all about like, here's the written rules, here's the unwritten rules. Like we get more bent out of shape about Fernando Tatis hitting a grand slam up 9-0 because the pitcher for the Arizona Diamondbacks left the ball right down the middle. You know what I'm saying? It's so stupid and it's so asinine, and this is why baseball is such a dying sport, and not just like North America, dude. Like there's it's just a joke, and it's sad because I'm such a baseball fan at my core. Like I tried to get you to watch baseball when we first started, working together, and I'll never forget the day you're like, I just want to go to Fenway Park to like take a couple of pictures like of the first inning, and then we can go to like the restaurant down the street and just like hang out. And it's like, dude, if I'm spending like $80 to go to Fenway, I'm getting all of my money's worth and my peanuts. Like that's it.